engaging Sri M, renowned yoga guru from India, in a virtual discussion on yoga and in the background of use of yoga and therapeutic applications, see how WHO can help build a system for evidence-based medicine in yoga. So this is an unscripted session, and we're expecting participants to log virtually online. And in the initial part, Ruediger will be asking questions to Sri M on yoga, its history, its evolution, epistemology, evolution, and then based on current approaches where we see a lot of yoga interventions being used in physiotherapy, in various kinds of therapeutic applications like sports medicine, physiotherapy, palliative care. Based on that, then how can WHO as a normative agency, a guideline setting agency, help to improve the evidence base in yoga? So that is what they will try to engage in this discussion and explore. So due to limited time, we haven't really kept a lot of time for audience questions. And I think Dr. Ruediger, who is the moderator, he will decide at that point, when they reach that point in the conversation, whether to take questions and how many audience questions he can take. But all of the audience here are encouraged to put your questions in the chat, which some of them will be answered online, otherwise we'll answer later on email. So as a program for the event, we will initially have the welcome, objectives, and introductions. So after this, I will be then moving on to the biographies as introductions, and then I hand over to Ruediger, who will moderate the session. So let me first introduce the two speakers. So as WHO's role, being a public health agency working for public health, we are hopeful that our staff and partners can continuously contribute to how WHO is developing our future and strategies to make use of the latest and interesting new tools in health for the global good. So these kind of dialogues, like today's dialogues, we hope that would help us to contextualize better how old tools, or those which were used in older days, can still be contributing to the common good and the global good. So the Department of Health Promotions activities will be introduced by Ruediger, so I'm not going into that. And let us quickly dwell on the objectives of this session. So when we started this program, we have listed out 3 objectives. So the objective 1 is to understand the 8 limbs of yoga and how they are used in combination for the purposes of improving health. So those 8 limbs, they get used in various combinations. Explore how therapeutic yoga, this is the second one, explore how therapeutic yoga can develop its own approaches for evidence-based medicine, including developing research frameworks and evidence databases. And third is to see how recent developments on therapeutics in yoga can be furthered and improved. So with this, I move on to the speaker introductions. Sri M. Sri M is a yogi, social reformer, and educationist, and currently serves as the Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University in Hyderabad, India. He has devoted his life imparting yoga to people across continents with the aim of serving humanity and raising human consciousness. He was born in 1949 in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala, India. He was initiated as a disciple at the age of 19 years into the Natha Sampradaya, a yogic lineage of India, under the grace of his guru, Maheshwarnath Babaji. After a few years of his yogic induction, Sri M established the Satsang Foundation, and this mission has resulted in several initiatives in the areas of education, community health, environment, and the oneness of humanity. The Satsang Foundation runs rural children's schools and also runs regular training courses on yoga for teachers and practitioners, most of which are recognized by the Ministry of Ayush, Government of India. In 2022, he was awarded a national prize of the Government of India called the Padma Vibhushan for his work on yoga and education. He's also the author of more than 15 well-read books, and the most famous one is his own memoir from his days in the Himalayas, and it's titled Apprentice to a Himalayan Master, a Yogi's Autobiography, which had been published in 2011. With that, I move to introduce Dr. Ruediger Krech. Dr. Ruediger Krech is the Director of Department of Health Promotion at the World Health Organization in Geneva since September 2019. He heads WHO's work on risk factors such as tobacco consumption and harmful use of alcohol. He's responsible for work on health promoting settings and programs for more physical activity. In addition to his normative work, his team supports member states with appropriate health promotion instruments such as health literacy, empowerment, and community engagement, public health legislation, and fiscal measures to design well-being societies. Prior to this, Dr. Krech was Director of Universal Health Coverage and Health Systems and played a key role in placing this issue on the global health agenda. From 2009 to 2014, Dr. Krech was the Director of Social Determinants of Health, Human Rights, Ethics, and Equity. Prior to joining WHO, Dr. Krech worked at the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, where he developed and implemented the social protection agenda for Germany's development cooperation, and also worked at the WHO Regional Office for Europe in Copenhagen, where he was head of unit for healthy aging. Dr. Krech studied educational science and human medicine, and he was one of the first public health graduates from Germany in 1991. He was awarded a doctorate in public health at the University of Bielefeld. With this, we then can move into the Q&A session. I invite Dr. Ruediger, who's a moderator, and Sri M to proceed with the conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Yamuna, for this setting the scene and the very kind introductions to Dr. Sri M and myself. So first of all, thank you very much and a warm welcome, Sri M, to being with us here in WHO's headquarters in Geneva. As many of you know, we have 6 regional offices, and one of that also is in India. But it's great to see you here in Geneva because the questions we have for you, of course, they concern everyone around the world, and so therefore I'm very, very happy that we could arrange this dialogue. As a start, I would just like to say, well, here in our work in health promotion, we're also looking not only at the risk factors, thank you very much, on tobacco, alcohol, physical inactivity, and also the settings, so the everyday life in which we live, which is so important for promoting health, but we're also looking at well-being. And the reason for that being that health promotion is about to take control over one's health and lives. That is the essence of health promotion. It's about making own decisions and how I am supported by my societal environment to making such healthy decisions. And I'm saying that because I think this will have a lot to do with the discussion we're going to have, Sri M. So when I now look at our work on what we call traditional medicine, and yoga is one part of this in our understanding, we've just opened an institute, the WHO Center in India, together with Ayush, with the ministry responsible also for traditional medicine and yoga in India, because we believe that we need to actually increase the knowledge, the understanding of traditional medicine and yoga for people's common understandings. And we also need to then perhaps work a little bit more on the scientific basis for yoga? And that is my first question to you, because I mean, yoga has shown for thousands of years that it works, that it actually creates better health, that it's actually used for mental health and well-being of people, but also is very beneficial in times of disease for people. Now, the evidence, and there's many questions. I mean, many of us know a little bit about yoga, but there's many questions we all have. And in yoga, for thousands of years, this was actually transferred from one to the other orally. So that is how it actually works, and that is what we have to appreciate. That this is a science which is, given further to the next generations through the word of people who know how to train and how to do yoga. Now, what is your understanding? How is the relationship between Western medicine and yoga, and is there something that we can work on this scientific basis?
Thank you, Doctor. I'd like to say that this dividing line that we make between Western medicine and traditional systems like yoga, I think it's about time this boundary is made a little more transparent. I understand that in Western medicine, everything goes by experiment and you need results and you need research. I understand that. It is not as if there is no such thing in traditional systems of medicine. You may know it, but let me say that Ayurveda and yoga are very connected to each other. Why? Because Ayurveda shouldn't be looked at as just a system of diagnosis and medicine. The meaning of the word Ayurveda, Ayu means life, and Veda means the science of life. So this word covers everything: environment, practice of yoga. Medicine is only one part of it. You see, so like for instance, I give you an example. Suppose a traditional Ayurvedic physician prescribes a medicine for a particular symptom, not symptom, ailment. They don't go so much by symptoms, but the root of the ailment. While the medicine is being prescribed, the physician would tell you that you have to follow such and such a procedure in your daily life. This is called dinachara, daily practice. Now, for instance, there are some medicines which, if you eat, you should keep away from salt, from sugar, from sour things. So it's not just the medicine. So I'm a little bit concerned when Ayurveda has become where medicines can be bought, or purchased across the counter. It's as dangerous as giving scheduled medicines across the counter without a doctor's prescription or understanding. Somewhere, even Ayurveda seems to have become a little more commercial in that. But having said that, I must say that there still are people who are seriously interested in Ayurveda being a way of life. And as far as yoga is concerned, most people, you can tell me when it's time to talk.
No, it's fantastic.
So when, as far as yoga is concerned, as you said, it's very ancient. It's not that yoga has come to us only with the text called the Yoga Pradipika or the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which Dr. Yamuna was talking about Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 steps of yoga and so on, but much older. There is a set of Upanishads. Upanishads at a conservative estimate, maybe 1,000 years old, perhaps. There are 20 or more Upanishads which are called the Yoga Upanishads. They deal with all the things which have been subsequently described by other texts, including asana, pranayam. And the Yoga Upanishads are ancient. They come from the Yajurveda, which is the second Veda after Rig Veda. So now the most important thing about yoga as I said about Ayurveda, is that yoga is not just a therapeutic practice, although it can be used as a therapy. It's again another system of life. How you cannot practice yoga without fresh air. Can you imagine breathing in the pranayam and breathing in all polluted air inside? This is not possible. So, environment is very important. Pure air is very important. Food. Now, you know that yoga has eight parts. Generally, it has been codified into eight parts by Patanjali. Before that, there was no such system. He systematized it, of course. So, the eight parts, which are in fact nowhere in the text called the Yoga Sutra, which came to be written down much later, as you said, by rote. Somebody taught it to somebody. It came like that from generation to generation. Then finally it was written down. I don't even know who actually wrote it down, but it came to us at Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And nowhere does Patanjali call it Ashtanga Yoga, although yoga has been popularized in the West as Ashtanga Yoga. Why? Because Anga means parts. Ashta is eight. So Ashtanga Yoga. Now in this, the eight Angas, the most important before you start any practice is what are called Yama Niyamas, rules and regulations to be followed by the practitioner. Now, this includes the concerns that you addressed, which is environment, fresh air, healthy food, trying to keep your body free from any chemical intervention so that it doesn't change the structure of your thinking through chemical intervention. This includes drugs, alcohol, um, so what is normally used, tobacco. Tobacco might give you a temporary high. We all know that because it has nicotine, but it can cause lasting damage. So all this is first to be looked into in the Yamaniyamas, rules and regulations to be followed. Plus, the key sentence in um, Yamaniyamas is neither too much or too little.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you follow that and then go further, then there is asana, pranayama, breathing, and all that. But this is very, very important. So we have to protect.
Let us just spend a second more on this because very often I hear, but you as WHO, you need to really look at this westernized medicine and evidence, and we're putting up these evidence through randomized controlled trials, which is all good and fine. But also in westernized medicine, if I just take the issue of cardiovascular diseases, so you have high blood pressure.
Yes.
So then you can take, of course, medicines to get your blood pressure down.
Right.
But every cardiologist would say, well, that doesn't really mean much if you're not also reducing your body mass index. So if you're losing weight, if you're eating, fresh fruit and vegetables more, if you eat less meat, if you're more physically active, that is known by every cardiologist in the Western world as well. And that's what you're saying also. So that a certain, style exactly requires that, a broader, understanding of how and under which conditions we live. Right. And when you're saying that, of course, one of the main things in yoga is, of course, breathing. Yes. Right. So if I breathe polluted air, that doesn't really work. And so we know that, of course, in any country we have an increasing number of people not breathing.
You're right.
Healthy air.
Well, India, yes.
And in India, and depending where you work, you might be exposed to a lot of chemicals as well, which is also not then benefiting you. So that is, I think, the first understanding, which I think is important, that it's the same in both ways how you look at medicine, the same in yoga and the same in Western and in Ayurveda. Let me come to this this thing of one of the important areas of yoga, which is breathing. Right. So, can you tell me or tell us all how breathing is related to good health? Because very often, people I know who do yoga, they look at the postures, but they're not looking. And myself, I had them. How do you then also keep this breathing? Come on. So, can you tell us a little bit more how these are interrelated, breathing and health?
Yeah. So, first thing is we call it pranayama. Now, prana is not actually the air that you breathe in and out. People think prana is controlling your breath. Mm. It only means breath has another word inside. It's called shwasa. You're breathing in and out. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, nature has made it in such a way that the life energy, which we call prana, it's the same energy that you inside us and outside us in the plants, in the trees. When you put in a seed and it grows into a plant, this is prana also working out there. Okay. So this is life energy. Now this life energy is linked very intimately to our breath. Mm-hmm. So therefore, by controlling and manipulating your breath in a positive way, you can take control of this life energy called prana. So this is why pranayama is such an important topic. Now, practice. So after the yama niyamas, which is the rules and regulations one need to follow to a great extent, like living in a good environment, wearing proper food and so on, eating proper clothes, not too tight, not, After that comes the asana, which is only postures. Asanas are not merely postures for building your muscle or to, they're good, of course, if you see the number of people practicing asanas in Hollywood, you know why they do it. They try to keep fit and so on, but that's not the end, be all and end all of it. Yes. Asanas have also a link to the endocrine system. I'll come to pranayama in a minute. The endocrine system. There are many asanas which are head down. Mm-hmm. Should not be done by people who have high blood pressure. These are some of the warnings that people don't give and end up in trouble. Mm-hmm. So, suppose you're okay and you're doing asanas or you're moderately doing this. The circulation of blood in this area increases. We are saying perhaps that increases also the circulation of blood in the areas which are normally not getting enough blood circulation. Improves thinking, makes for clarity, does many things to the brain. Okay. Now there are practices which keep your spine either this way or that way. Now, the spine has to be supple. Much of the problems of the back, I believe, come because from childhood we have been taught to lean. I think from childhood, if you at least for 6 hours or 5 hours in a day sit without leaning, the muscles of the spine develop enough to support your spine, and therefore it's a good prevent you against back problems. Once it comes, that's a different matter. So these are some of the advantages of asanas. There is one asana called Matsyasana, which if you do constantly, it massages the muscles in this area where you have the endocrine glands. Now, when anger comes, the endocrine glands pushes in a good amount of adrenaline into the system. So it could be when anger comes, or it could be when it is pushed in, anger comes. Now these are interrelated, but it is so. Now there are asanas which can soothe and massage this area so that your adrenaline glands are kept in good condition. First, you have to decide, of course, if I need to get angry or not. That's a mind decision. It's nothing to do with the physics. But once we have decided, perhaps one can control. Right. Now we come to pranayama. So the next step in the 8 angas is pranayama. Now, if suppose one is agitated, apart from the physical health, I'm talking about the mind. Suppose one is very agitated. If you close your eyes for a second and look at your breathing rhythm, you will see that your breathing rhythm is very agitated. So you're very angry, you know how it is. Right? Now, on the other hand, you are listening to beautiful music or something that you really love to do. You're going sitting outside, say, enough office. I'm sitting on the hill and Switzerland, of course, and no dearth of any beautiful places to sit and look at the trees and the mountains and the water, and your mind is calm. Turn around and watch your breath. It's usually very calm. So the ancient rishis, who we can say scientists in a way, they said if the state of mind can affect, so not control, affect your breathing pattern, maybe one can adjust the breathing pattern and change the mindset, the way the mind operates. And it works. We have tried it out several times, especially on people who are convalescing, for instance, from a serious disorder. The prana, the moment you do pranayam, and it's another important thing, the moment you begin to be aware of your breath, the breath slows down. This is something interesting. I don't know why, don't ask me, but the moment you say, okay, let me watch now, most of the time we are not aware of our breath. And it's such an important part of our life. From the womb, we have started breathing, and when it stops, you know what happens. So therefore, the breath becomes, pranayam becomes a very important part of the practice of yoga. One, to breathe fresh air, you need the environment. Once you have got it, it improves the breathing. It fills more oxygen into your lungs. We actually have forgotten to breathe. People do shallow breathing. Deep breathing is not just on the chest, but also the diaphragm. So when you breathe, you also bring the air into the diaphragm, push it a little, and then take it up. So you max as much as possible, you're taking optimum level of oxygen required for the system.
Yeah. So first of all, many times in difficult conversations, in difficult negotiations here in WHO, when member states and is very heated up, you can see that everybody's just very inhaling. It's not exhaling, right? So and sometimes I feel we should all take a deep breath and relax, because then also the atmosphere, you can see, people are then reminded, whoa, right? So let's get cool down and then take a next step in the negotiation. So I think that's a very good way of putting this. But also, those of you who sing, what you said just now is something that every singing teacher would also ask the students to do, because you cannot sing if you're not inhaling deeply, properly. If you're just like here, the tone will be extremely pressed. So this, I think, again, is something that resonates a lot with many other areas.
I may intervene for a second.
Yes.
It also applies very much to chanting. Sanskrit chanting has many ups and downs, and you cannot do it unless you have a good control of your breath. It's impossible to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, I want to come back to one of the things you just said, which I found so important, that breath is not just breathing, but it's also the power of life. And I know that you also have boarding schools that you're the head of. And in your boarding schools, I think what I've seen so far, you're really looking at how you actually teach students also to breathe, and which is so important, if you know this. And the thing that you just said, and not leaning like this, but that we're sitting up straight, and that we learn this as children, prevents a lot of longer lasting skeleton problems and lower back pain and all that we will have in later life. So what I want to come at is that you have said it's a way of looking at things. Yoga is not just the different exercises, but it's also underneath, it's a certain way of looking at life and looking at the life sources and assets. Now, and as you're actually then having or creating environments for children to actually grow up healthy, you call them grow up schools.
People grow.
People grow. Can you see, you're doing this for a long time span now. Can you see, how healthy people are? Is there something we could look at? How healthy, unhealthy are the children? Can you see how that develops? Is there what we call a life cycle approach, where we see, okay, what you're doing in early life has consequences on later life?
Okay.
And is there something that we could look at together in, longer term effects of the way you're actually creating environments for children in your schools?
Yeah. We haven't yet, it's not easy to come by that kind of data and scientific way of looking at it. But since you mentioned it, I think we should now start looking at the effects of the way the children live in our schools, for instance. But it's not such a long time. This school, which the People Grow School, which is with us, is about now 17, 13, 14 years old. And in the Rishi Valley School, which you said you went to, that is much older. But this is about 15 years old, roughly. And what we have noticed that when children go out, we've already had 4 or 5 batches of, 6 or 7 batches going out after the 12th. We definitely see a change in the way they live, the way they operate, and many of the children come from households which are not that well educated, or not many of them. And let me tell you very proudly that many of our alumni, the children who were there, it's a boys and girls together school. It's a co-education school, and we have no uniforms. We don't want to have uniforms. We think to put somebody into a uniform is like making an army, and then so anyway, these kids, I'm very proud to say, and many of them are doing well, especially as far as their physical health is concerned. They're good. And even in what they achieved, and it is unexpected that they would go from this background and come there. In fact, there is one girl who is now working with the UN in Egypt, in Cairo. There's another girl who is in Japan working with the government there. And we have many who have gone into agriculture because they don't want to go into the city and do any work. They are trying to use all modern facilities available and improve their own farms and their homelands. Throughout this, what we see, one string that runs across is that all physically healthy. I mean, not like a viral attack or something, it can happen to anybody. But even that, they're able to tackle better.
So the immune system
has become much better. And
yeah.
our mess, our dining hall, we serve only vegetarian food, which means eggs and vegetables, nothing more than that. And that is again optional. If you don't want eggs, you don't have to eat. That has done nothing to spoil their brains. They're perfectly all right. I think. We think so. Maybe we should now formulate with an individual child from the class 4, from class 7 to class 12, how it's changing, what's happening to them. We have to start charting it down. We haven't looked at it in that scientific, orderly way. I'm saying this generally.
So again, that's interesting, to keep people healthy, which is part of the spirit of it. Yeah. Now let's look at the other side, because I think many will be interested in this therapeutic yoga as well, right? So once we're moving from promoting health and trying to create healthy environments, which is the foundation, I understand. But then if if we do have a disease, yoga also can help. And so this therapeutic aspect of yoga is different from the normal or the general yoga, conventional yoga. And perhaps could you talk to us a bit about what the difference are? And many who are watching, they know that there's asanas, and how you're using different asanas and a combination of those for therapeutic yoga. So I just want to get into a little bit into, what are the differences and how do you actually use the different instruments of yoga that you have?
So now this all depends individually on what kind of problem that comes to you for treatment. We also have a wellness center where we have the practice of yoga and Ayurveda. Now, very close to where I live in Magnapalli, where all parameters of people who come there are checked first in a medical way. I've got a proper allopathic doctor with a blood pressure apparatus, this and that. But anyone who comes there for any kind of treatment, all the parameters are checked first, because then you know what happens afterwards. Otherwise, you don't know. And also, we don't teach them the wrong things that they become worse than when they came in. Right? So all this has to be taken care of. Now, here is the first is, even in yoga therapy, food is very important. Yoga therapy is not just a set of exercises. Now, that depends on what problem you have. If you have a problem in the back or the spine, we have a set of yogic exercises to all. But diet is important. Like, you want to get a yoga therapy treatment for, say, general health, or because you are putting on weight and you don't know what's happening and you want to control it. And many of the problems are because of overweight. Many problems, not all. And medicine seems to work, but allopathic medicines are probably the best to alleviate a critical phase of your illness. Like if you have a terrible headache, you suddenly can't stop headache with yoga, or you need to pop a crocin. I mean, that's okay. I'm not disputing that. It's come for many years and it works. I'm saying how to prevent the headache. For instance, there is yogic treatment for migraine, which is a terrible thing. Many people suffer from it. Now, this treatment has to be, for example, one, proper diet. If the patient says, look, I'm going to take your treatment for migraine, but every evening I need to drink, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So what do we do? So since you asked me, what do you do? What is the yoga therapy? One of the important therapies, part of the therapy is food and the intake, fresh air, and then of course the asanas and pranayam required for that particular purpose. You the back, then there are ways and means by which the muscles can be stretched and soothed, and then you can try it out. If you have migraine, yes, there is treatment in yoga for that. The very fact that through pranayam you can calm down your mind has a great effect on your migraine. Migraine usually is caused through tension. Sinusitis. Many people even think sinusitis is migraine because it becomes so serious sometimes. How do you treat it? Now, in yoga, there are ways and means to clean your nostrils through, it's called neti, taking in water and breathing it out. And there are exercises of breathing where, for instance, there is an exercise called Brahmari. Brahmari is like making the sound of a bumblebee, humming. It's on record. We may be able to test it also scientifically that a constant repetition of Brahmari builds up nitric acid in this area, which is a great preventive against virus, at least virus going deep into the lungs. We have been doing this in our school throughout this pandemic. Not a single child has got, believe me, but I have no records. I mean, we can create records, of course. And the parents said, let the children be in school because we don't know what will happen if they come home. Now, Brahmari is something which can actually be tested out. If you have a lung disease or a lung problem, I'm not saying that it is a perfect cure for lung cancer, this is carrying it too far. But even if somebody is recovered from that through some other radiation, whatever they do, this will help you to maintain status quo from there. Now, also chanting of mantras, which is also part of yoga. Mantra yoga, Shabda yoga, yoga asanas, pranayam, they're all one. Mantra yoga. The commonest sound that you hear when people are convalescing in a hospital is like this. Mm, mm, because deep down in the subconscious, the brain is aware that it has a shooting sound which brings about healing in the body. And therefore we say, chant the last part of Om, which is Ma. Om. I feel it affects the cell. Well, ask me scientific evidence, and we need to work on this. This is, we are not equipped to work on this. We are from one side, the scientific community should agree and say, okay, no prejudice, let's try it.
Yeah.
These are some of the aspects of therapeutic yoga that I can touch on. And I know that there is at least one institute I know in Lonavala who have done a good job with therapeutic yoga. We are also just started working.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for this. Take a lot from this, also in terms of, what are the specific things we can all do? What are the elements where we need those conducive environments? But also, what is the general, the foundation of yoga, which is the connection with the world and the spirit in which we live. So thank you very much for alluding to this, Sri. So perhaps we can.
So do you have any other question?
No, I think we.
Okay. So can I take a few minutes?
Of course.
And ask you a couple of things we wrote down here. So WHO is developing global norms for guidelines, especially case management, public health approach for conditions, diseases, doctors, health workers all over the world to use these norms. So, considering yoga, is there some way we can work out some kind of norms and which look, at least the data look pretty scientific in a tabular form, so that the scientists, those who are still skeptical about it, may take a look at it? That is one of my questions.
Yeah. So I mean, just to say, well, where would WHO guidelines? Where do they affect our everyday life? And actually, when we look through the day, I mean, that I sleep without airplane noise is usually due to WHO norms and guidelines on, noise, right? So when I then do the bathing and breakfast and all that, the water, there's water guidelines, standards for cleanliness. Then when I take my breakfast, I have healthy eating guidelines. When I go to work, we have transport guidelines. So on public transport and physical activity, how we should be active. And I can go through the day. So when I then work, there's occupational health and safety guidelines for the work environment in which I am, or the schools. As we talked about schools, there's guidelines and minimal standards for health promoting schools. And so we can actually go through the day until we go to sleep. So there's guidelines for all of this, which is interesting because very often they are taken up not by the healthcare sector, but by all the other sectors, because they are dependent on the identification of the standards in which they can operate. Now, when you ask what sort of standards could we set up, first of all, it's where we started perhaps our discussion to say, what are the foundations for yoga, right? So, what is the spirit of this? And that calls very much, first of all, for support of, that we need to take care of this planet. And if we're not taking care of this planet, we cannot take care of ourselves. And how do we meet the needs of the people within these planetary boundaries? That is important, that we actually, because we're a little bit a lonely voice in this still. I mean, of course, there's now more and more understanding of what the risks are, that this globe is at risk, that humanity is at risk, and we're actually jumping from one crisis to the other, and we have multiple crises at the moment. The earth can also tell us that perhaps we have a crisis because we didn't look and we didn't listen to all these wake-up calls with all the pandemics in this very young millennium, right? And so that is the first thing that we can do together, to say, wherever you stand, whatever understanding of the world, perception of the world, perspective to the world you have, this is something which is true for you in yoga, and it's true for us in public health overall. So that's the first.
Just thing. About to say that what you said just now is like the Yama Niyamas of WHO.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Really, seriously.
Yeah. And then I think your understanding of, we then touched on breath and the difference between breath and breathing. So the energy of life, which is there, and also what you're doing, because the reason that you're having boarding schools is not that you want everybody to do yoga.
No.
That's not your
That's
point,
not
right?
the reason. To open the mind up.
Yeah.
We have one class because we are surrounded. Sorry, can I say?
Of course.
We're surrounded by forests. So Sunday there is one class which every child loves and is not in the classroom. Bird watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so everybody comes equipped with a pair of binoculars, and that's their greatest lesson in the whole of the week. They love bird watching. Why bird watching? Because we cannot cut ourselves away from the environment. These are, you see, in the ancient times, the rishis used to live in forests, not because they didn't want to run away from cities. There were not many cities anyway, but because in the forest you learn to share with nature.
Mm-hmm.
Even when, sometimes one wonders, when there's a big tree, hundreds of activities are going on in this tree. Life. Ants are building their nests. All kinds of things are happening here. So unless we are exposed to that, we never really can find out about this earth, and we cannot save this earth. We need to be related to them. This is one of the reasons we run the school. When the parents, many parents want children to get good marks, get good jobs. So when they come for admission, we tell the parents, look, if this is what you want, this is not the school. Please take it with all-round development. Yes, of course, they will pass their exams because they love the studies, because it is taught in a way where they're interested in it. But the aim is the blooming and the connection with nature and environment. So therefore, we end up with very little students, but it's okay. Yeah. We're not looking for a commercial enterprise to make money.
Yeah.
Our teacher-student ratio is 11:1.
Yeah.
11 students to one teacher.
Wow.
They say, why you're running at a loss? I said, no. We are running it so that these one child with 11 children with one teacher probably tomorrow can save the world. Who knows?
Yes, exactly. So that's really really important. Also, good also message to so many others. Now, the way you're systematizing yoga, right? So, and you say
We're
that,
trying.
But you also say, well, you don't even know who has written this down, but it has been written down at one point, which is then now, of course, important for all of us to then see what does this mean, the systematization of yoga. And we've just been into one of these areas just as exemplary, but there's the other much more. And it would, of course, be interesting to then see, number one, what does this mean in terms of interventions? And how is the interplay when we're getting into yoga practice, if I may? What is the interplay of these different areas so that you either can stay healthy, or, and as we then looked in our second part of the interview with you, that we can then see what are the other therapeutic aspects of this. Now, this would, of course, mean that perhaps we need some observational experience, right? Which, when we're coming to guidelines in WHO, we have a very rigid process of doing this. We all know, and what we call is the sort of the most or the best evidence instrument is randomized controlled trials, right? So, but we do find that quite often, when we're, for instance, looking at policies that we're recommending to our member states, randomized controlled trials are not the best way of showing efficacy, right? So we do also understand that we need perhaps to also think what is the best instrument in showing the highest level of evidence. And sometimes it is not randomized controlled trials. So we need to appreciate that also for our public health work overall. But then, if we're looking at yoga, I would also say that the way you're looking at the body and the impact certain interventions have on your composure and the way you are breathing, the way you're treating certain illnesses, needs to be looked at differently. So also there, I would say randomized controlled trials is not the right way. Observational studies would be important, would be very important, and there also to see, to gather more data. For instance, as we had the example of, can we show that the way you're creating environments for children in the boarding schools, you're saying that there's much less illness in your school population than in other schools. That would be interesting, right? So it's not just the way you're doing this, it's the environment that you're creating in your schools. So I would be very interested in learning more about those medium and longer term effects, if we can see this over time, if we can see it compared to other school environments, what is it there, and see also with children, because that's what we call in health promotion, it's co-design, right? So if a student doesn't like watch birds in the morning at 7 o'clock, he or she will not be open for understanding what world is out there. Or if you don't want to actually sit straight, you will try to. So, we know this, right? So of course, so the compliance is only if you as a child, also as a teacher, and as a parent, teacher is very important. You know, if you actually, you know, you actually feel the importance of it and why you're doing it, and that you're fully doing it full-heartedly, and not just, you know, because my teacher tells me so. You see what I mean? That's what we say is co-design, so that you're working with everyone who is involved in a decision into this decision making. Will we or will we not, and the school class, make sure that we are all sitting straight, right? And that is something that you know, we could work together to then also see how is the compliance of this with the children. Why are they doing it? Do they see the added value? In, you know, of course, in the age, of course, a 4-year-old will not be able to say that, but a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old will be able to say that, right? So that also, I think, would be very important for us also to learn from you, to see, oh, that's interesting, right? So that this apparently works, and so how can we learn from that for other school environments, for instance, taking this example. So this is something, you know, the plea from my side is, in today's world, with all these complexities, it is important that we're learning from things that have worked for millions, thousands, or not millions, but thousands of years, right? So and to see, you know, to better understand why this has worked, right? Because our modern mindset is we always want to know why, right? Which is good. That's part of you know, how we're actually developing this world, but also, of course, there's a flip side to it. But now so this, why does it work and how does it work, so that others who see this then can replicate this. And that's what evidence is all about. That it's not me just saying, hey, that's how it is, but that you can replicate and see the same things as I am seeing, because we have identified what the indicators are, for instance, right? So that's how it is, not more, right? So, and that is something that we can work on. To say,
this is my plea.
This is right. This is the way how you're seeing it, and I can replicate. I can see. I can put myself into your shoes and see the world exactly alike. Right. So that's how I would say.
So my concluding, I would say that we need to work together on this in some way. In what way you can work with us, and in what way we can work with you, is open to various factors. But it would be nice if we can work together in some way.
Yes.
And so this is my.
And at WHO,
that's all I wanted to add.
That's fantastic. I'm really absolutely thrilled, because we at WHO, we want to see what's really happening, and we want to use all the resources we can have. This will help us to get out of crises that we see so many formed right now. So therefore we can use every knowledge that we have around the world.
And if you or your team or anyone would like to visit, and if you want someone to come here, it all can be worked out if the purpose is served for it, which is to bring it on a scientific evidence. This is my purpose. Since we're is that
maybe questions?
So do we have another?
No, I think the time is up.
The time is up.
So I think Ruediger can give the concluding remarks and talk about the department a little and conclude.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It was a real pleasure for us to actually meet with you. I think you've summarized it very well. I think there's an interest on both sides to really look at yoga more systematically, to see what is there, why does it work, how does it work, and to use this in both aspects, not just the personal individual interaction, but also to see in what sort of environments we need to do this, and that's where actually I think we have a very common and similar understanding, and that's what I'm taking also from this meeting. So
thank you very much again, Dr.
Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
and colleagues who ever joined us online, thank you very much for today's session. Thanks.
Now, it's close. I wanted to show you.